All right, welcome back, everyone, to the 21st Century Man podcast. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into something that's, well, pretty fundamental to all of us, guys, our health. We're cracking open Chapter 8 of the 21st Century Man, and this one is titled Decoding Your Cancer Genes.
Yeah, this chapter is really interesting. It's written by Heather Hannon. She's an oncology nurse practitioner, and she has a ton of experience with genetic counseling and testing. And she really cuts through a lot of the confusion around like how our genes actually affect our risk of getting cancer.
Right, right. And what really hooked me right at the beginning of this chapter is the story about this guy, Larry James. He got diagnosed with prostate cancer, caught it early, thankfully, but then because there was a history of breast cancer in his family, he decided to get genetic testing. And guess what? They found he had a BRCA2 mutation.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful example of how, everything's connected when it comes to our health. And it's not just about one specific cancer. I mean,
Yeah.
that BRCA2 finding, it wasn't just about his prostate cancer. It actually led to them finding early stage male breast cancer in him too.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the big takeaway here, right? Understanding our genes, like having this roadmap to potential health risks that we wouldn't even know about otherwise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, the book, it lays it out pretty clearly. Our health is a combination of luck, obviously, the genes we inherit, and then, of course, the choices we make, our lifestyle.
Right.
And while we can't change our genes, knowing what they are can give us like a real advantage in making smart decisions about our health and taking control of our lives.
Totally. So today, what we're going to do is try to unpack this whole topic of genetics and cancer risk. I know it can seem a little complicated, so we're going to try to break it down, clarify some of the terminology, and really focus on what you can actually do with this information. Actionable steps, that's what we're all about.
All right, let's get to it. So let's start, just like the book does, at the very beginning with, what exactly is this stuff? Our genetic material, the DNA.
Okay, so DNA, it's in every single cell in our bodies, right?
It is. It's like the instruction manual, the code that runs the entire show.
Right.
It determines everything, from the color of our eyes to how our bodies fight off infections.
So it's kind of like, what is it, like a computer code? Is that what the book says?
Yeah, it's like a super complex code, and it uses just 4 letters.
4 letters, that's it.
That's all it takes. These letters represent what are called nucleic acids. They're A, T, C, and G.
Okay, so A, T, C, G. Those are the 4 letters of our genetic code.
Yeah, and they combine in specific sequences like words to form amino acids.
Amino acids, right. Those are the building blocks of proteins, and proteins do all the heavy lifting in our cells.
Exactly. They carry out, pretty much every function in our bodies. And when scientists, when they sequence a genome, what they're doing is reading the exact order of these 4 letters in our DNA.
So like spelling out the instructions.
Yep, that's a good way to put it.
Got it. And now genes, those are like specific sections of this DNA code, right? Like they hold the instructions for a specific protein or a function.
Precisely. We inherit 2 copies of each gene, one from mom, one from dad.
Okay, so 2 copies of each gene. And this is important because it's not just one gene that determines things like our risk of cancer, right?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. Most traits and definitely our risk for most diseases, it's not just one gene, one outcome.
Right.
It's usually way more complicated. It's lots of genes working together, interacting with each other.
Okay, so it's like a team effort, not a solo act.
It's exactly.
So then this has always kind of blown my mind, but like every cell in my body has the same DNA, right? But my skin cells are totally different from, the cells in my liver or my brain. So how does that work if they all have the same instructions?
Good question. That's where gene expression comes in.
Gene expression. Okay, break that down for me.
So gene expression is like, it's how the information in a gene is actually used to make a functional protein.
Okay.
But not all genes are active in every cell all the time. It's more like, think of it like a dimmer switch for each gene.
A dimmer switch. Okay.
So in your liver cells, for example, the genes that are needed for liver function, those are turned up, while genes for something like, say, hair growth, those might be turned down or off completely.
So it's like each cell has this huge toolbox, but it only uses the tools it needs for that particular job.
Perfect analogy. And what's really fascinating is that, we're still learning so much about how these dimmer switches are controlled, what turns genes on and off. But we know that signals from within our body, like hormones and neurotransmitters, those play a big role.
Right. And it's not just internal stuff, right? The book talks about how things outside our bodies, like, what we eat, the air we breathe, even stress and just getting older, all these things can affect how our genes are expressed.
That's a really key point. Our lifestyle, it's not just a separate factor. It directly interacts with our genes and influences which ones are active. And this is something that always blows me away. You know how only about 1% of our DNA actually codes for making proteins?
Yeah.
Well, for a long time, scientists called the other 99% junk DNA.
Yeah.
But now we know that it's actually crucial for regulating those protein-making genes.
Really?
Yeah, it's like the master control panel for the whole system.
Wow. It's amazing how much we're still learning about our own biology.
It really is.
And it's mind-boggling when you think about just how much DNA is packed into each cell. Like the book says, if you unraveled all the DNA in one cell, it would be 6,000 miles long. 6,000 miles.
It's incredible, right? And to fit all that into a tiny cell, DNA is wound up tightly into structures called chromosomes. We have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, one set from each parent. And these chromosomes, they contain all our genes.
So that's how it all fits. Okay, so we've covered the basics of DNA, genes, and chromosomes. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. How do these genes affect our risk for cancer?
Right. So the book makes this really important point. We inherit a risk for a disease, not the disease itself.
Right, so just because you have a gene that's linked to cancer, it doesn't mean you're definitely going to get cancer.
Exactly. It's all about this interaction between our genes, our environment, and our lifestyle.
So it's not just nature versus nurture, it's nature and nurture.
Exactly. And the good news is that lifestyle factors play a huge role in our overall health. The book says that lifestyle changes alone could prevent at least 4 out of 10 cancer cases,
That's huge.
and it could cut the risk of heart disease in half.
So what we eat, how much we exercise, whether we smoke, all of that has a real impact.
Absolutely. Taking care of yourself is important for everyone, regardless of your genes.
Okay, so we've established that lifestyle is crucial. But what about genetic testing? Where does that fit in?
Well, genetic testing can give us a more personalized picture of our risks. Like in the story about Larry James. For some people who have high-risk mutations, lifestyle changes alone might not be enough. They might need more specific strategies to manage their risk.
Right, so genetic testing can help us figure out what those strategies should be. And speaking of specific strategies, the chapter mentions some new guidelines about prostate cancer and genetic testing. I think that's really important for our listeners.
Absolutely. So research is showing that a significant number of men with metastatic prostate cancer, meaning cancer that has spread beyond the prostate, they actually have a hereditary genetic mutation.
Okay.
So now the recommendation is that any man with metastatic prostate cancer should get genetic testing, no matter how old they are or their family history.
That's good to know.
Also, men with higher grade prostate cancer, specifically those with a Gleason score of 7 or higher, they should talk to their doctor about genetic testing, especially if they have a family history of breast, ovarian, or other related cancers.
So knowing this genetic information can really make a difference in how men are treated for prostate cancer.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and informed.
Okay, so let's talk more about changes in our genes. The chapter talks about something called genetic mutations. What are those exactly?
A genetic mutation, it's basically a change in the sequence of those 4 letters, A, T, C, and G,
Yeah.
that make up our DNA.
So it's like a typo in the code.
Exactly. Now, a lot of these typos are harmless. They don't really have any effect.
Okay.
But sometimes a mutation can happen in a really important part of a gene, and that can change how that gene functions. It could mean a protein doesn't work properly or doesn't get made at all. And if this happens in a gene that's supposed to protect us from cancer, it can increase our risk.
Right. Now, the book talks about these genes, BRCA1 and BRCA2. People often call them the breast cancer genes, but it explains that that's not really accurate, right?
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Okay.
Everyone has these genes, BRCA1 and BRCA2. They actually help repair damaged DNA and prevent cancer.
Oh, so they're the good guys.
Yeah, when they're working correctly. It's when there's a harmful mutation in one of these genes that they can't do their job properly.
And that's when the risk of cancer goes up.
Exactly.
So it's not the genes themselves, it's the errors in the genes.
Precisely.
Okay, so that's mutations. Now, what about acquired mutations? How are they different from the inherited ones?
Acquired mutations, they happen during our lifetime. They're not passed down from our parents.
Okay.
And they usually only affect certain cells in our body.
So they're kind of like random events.
Yeah, sometimes it's just bad luck, like a mistake when a cell divides. Our cells are dividing all the time, and sometimes errors happen.
But it's not always bad luck, right? The book talks about how environmental and lifestyle factors can also cause mutations.
Right. Things like exposure to pollution, radiation, smoking, even an unhealthy diet can all increase the rate of these mutations.
So again, taking care of ourselves makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's acquired mutations. Now let's talk about hereditary mutations, the ones we inherit from our parents.
Right. So these mutations are present in every cell in our body from the moment we're conceived. And because they're also in our germ cells, our eggs and sperm, they can be passed down to our children.
So these mutations are like part of our family tree.
Yeah, and they can significantly increase the risk of certain diseases. The book mentions that for a lot of hereditary conditions, you only need to inherit one copy of the mutated gene to be at risk.
So if one of your parents has the mutation, you have a 50-50 chance of inheriting it.
Exactly. And these hereditary mutations, they often require more than just basic lifestyle changes. People might need special screenings, preventative medications, or even surgery to reduce their risk.
Like a preventative mastectomy, for example.
Right. And it's important to remember that when someone is found to have a hereditary mutation, their family members might be at risk too.
That's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, it's really important to think about the whole family in these situations.
Now, the chapter also mentions something called SNPs. What are those?
SNPs are single nucleotide polymorphisms.
Ah,
They're like tiny variations in our DNA, just a single letter change.
okay.
And they're way more common than those big mutations we were talking about. Everyone had millions of SNPs in their genome.
Millions.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And while one SNP by itself usually doesn't have much effect on disease risk, having a certain combination of SNPs can actually increase your susceptibility to some common diseases.
So it's like a pattern of tiny changes that adds up to a bigger effect.
Exactly. And as we learn more about these SNP profiles, we might be able to use them to tailor screenings and prevention strategies in the future.
That's fascinating. So we've got mutations, acquired mutations, hereditary mutations, and SNPs. And then there's this whole other layer of complexity. Epigenetics. What's that all about?
Epigenetics is about how our genes are expressed, so whether they're turned on or off or dialed up or down, without actually changing the DNA sequence itself.
So it's not about the code itself, it's about how the code is read.
Exactly. And what's really cool about epigenetics is that our environment and lifestyle can actually influence these epigenetic changes.
So things like eating healthy, exercising, not smoking, all that good stuff, it might actually be protecting us from harmful epigenetic changes.
That's the idea. It's all connected.
Okay, so with all this talk about genes and mutations, how do we actually figure out our own personal risk?
Yeah, the book says that about 20% of people might have an inherited mutation linked to some kind of genetic condition.
20%, that's a lot.
It is. And having a genetic predisposition just means you have a higher chance of developing a certain disease because of your genes.
Right, so it doesn't mean you'll definitely get the disease, but it's something to be aware of.
Exactly. And one of the most important things you can do is learn about your family health history. If you have close relatives who have had certain diseases, especially at younger ages, it could mean your risk is higher.
So talk to your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, find out what's in your family tree.
Absolutely. And the book mentions some red flags that could suggest a hereditary condition. Like if a disease is diagnosed at a really young age, or if there are rare conditions in your family, or if multiple family members on the same side have the same disease.
Or if someone has multiple different types of cancer, like breast and ovarian cancer.
Right. These are all signs that it might be worth looking into genetic testing.
Okay, so what about genetic testing? The chapter makes it seem like a pretty powerful tool.
It is. Genetic testing can look for those specific mutations that increase your risk of disease.
And there are different ways to get genetic testing, right?
Yeah, you've got those direct-to-consumer tests like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA.
Right, those are the ones you see advertised all the time.
Yeah, they've become really popular because they're relatively inexpensive and easy to do.
And they can tell you about your ancestry and some health risks, right?
Exactly. And that can be a good starting point for conversation with your doctor.
So they can be a good way to get the ball rolling.
They can. But it's really important to understand their limitations too.
What kind of limitations?
Well, for one thing, they might not test for all the possible mutations. Like
Yeah.
the book gives the example of 23andMe. They only screen for a few common BRCA mutations, so you could still have a mutation and not know it.
So it's not a guarantee.
Right. And another thing is that they don't involve a doctor or genetic counselor in the process. So if you get a result that's concerning, you really need to talk to a professional about what it means.
So it's good to be informed and do your research before you jump into one of those tests.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what about the other kind of genetic testing, the professional kind?
Professional genetic testing is usually ordered by a doctor or genetic counselor, and they tend to focus on genes that have clear medical recommendations attached to them.
So if they find a mutation, there's something you can actually do about it.
Exactly. And that's really important. The book gives some good examples, like testing for inherited heart conditions. Finding those early on can lead to lifestyle changes, medications, or even devices that can prevent sudden cardiac death.
Wow. And what about for cancer?
Well, finding an inherited cancer risk can lead to more targeted screenings, preventative medications, or even risk-reducing surgeries.
So it's about being proactive and staying ahead of the game.
Exactly.
Now, the chapter goes into some detail about different genes and the risks associated with them. It's pretty complicated stuff.
Yeah, it is. But the main takeaway is that different mutations carry different levels of risk, and some genes can actually increase your risk for multiple conditions.
Like BRCA2, for example. It's not just about breast cancer.
Right. BRCA2 mutations can also increase the risk of prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, and melanoma in men.
So if you know you have a BRCA2 mutation, it's important to be aware of all those potential risks.
Absolutely. And get the appropriate screenings.
Right.
Early detection is key.
Now, there's one gene that the chapter talks about that's particularly interesting. It's the APOE gene.
Oh, yeah, that one's fascinating. This gene is involved in how our bodies handle cholesterol, and there are three main versions of it.
Okay.
And having a specific version, the APOE4 version, can increase your risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Alzheimer's, that's a scary one.
It is, but it's important to remember that not everyone who has this gene variant will develop Alzheimer's.
Right.
And a lot of people with Alzheimer's don't have this gene variant, so it's not a simple cause and effect.
Okay, so it's complicated. But is there any benefit to knowing your APOE status?
There could be. Research is showing that there might be some early brain changes that happen before you even have symptoms of Alzheimer's. And if we can identify those early changes, it might give us a chance to intervene early. Things like diet, exercise, and blood pressure control, they might help slow down the progression of the disease.
So knowing your APOE status might motivate you to take those steps.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's recap the pros and cons of genetic testing.
Sounds good.
On the plus side, genetic testing can identify your risks, help you get personalized screenings, and motivate you to make healthy lifestyle changes. It can also give you information to protect your family and guide treatment decisions.
And sometimes, knowing your risk, even if it's higher than average, can actually reduce anxiety. It's the not knowing that can be the most stressful.
That makes sense. But there are downsides too, right?
Yes, definitely. The biggest one is that a test can tell you about your risk, but it can't predict the future. It doesn't mean you'll definitely get a disease.
Right.
And sometimes the results can be inconclusive, which can be frustrating.
And finding out you have a higher risk can obviously be scary.
It can. It's important to talk to a genetic counselor or doctor who specializes in genetics to help you understand the results and what they mean for you.
So if you're thinking about genetic testing, definitely find a qualified professional to guide you through the process.
Absolutely.
Now, the chapter mentions some specific labs that do genetic testing, like Myriad Genetics, Ambry Genetics, Invite, LabCorp, and Quest Diagnostics. Are they all pretty much the same?
Well, they have different strengths and weaknesses. Some specialize in certain types of testing, some have better reports, some have more counselors available to help you. The book gives a good overview of the different options.
So, again, do your research.
Yeah, and make sure the lab is CLIA certified. That means they meet certain quality standards.
Got it. And just to be clear, there are different possible results you can get from genetic testing, right?
Right. A positive result means they found a mutation. A negative result means they didn't find anything. But remember, that doesn't mean you have zero risk.
And sometimes the results are inconclusive, meaning they're not sure what the findings mean. Okay, so let's say you get your results back and you find out you have a higher risk for something. What can you do about it?
Well, the first step is to talk to your doctor or genetic counselor about what those results mean for you specifically. They can help you develop a personalized plan. That might include starting screenings earlier or getting screened more often.
Okay.
It might mean making some lifestyle changes.
Like what?
Well, the usual suspects: eating a healthy diet, exercising regularly, maintaining a healthy weight, not smoking. But knowing you have a higher risk can sometimes be a powerful motivator to really stick to those healthy habits.
Right. It's one thing to know it's good for you, but it's another thing to know that it could actually save your life.
Exactly. And there are resources available to help you make those changes, like nutritionists, weight loss programs, support groups.
And in some cases, there's the option of preventative surgery.
Yeah, like a mastectomy for women with BRCA mutations or removing the stomach for people with a high risk of stomach cancer.
Those are big decisions.
They are. And they should only be made after careful consideration and discussion with your doctor.
Now, the chapter also talks about how genetic testing is leading to more personalized treatments. Can you explain that?
Sure. So, by understanding a person's genes, doctors can sometimes tailor treatments to be more effective. For example, people with Lynch syndrome, they have a higher risk of colon cancer.
Okay.
But taking aspirin can actually lower their risk significantly.
Yeah.
And there are also targeted therapies that work better for people with certain mutations, like PIRP inhibitors for BRCA-related cancers.
So it's like using the genetic information to create a more precise treatment plan.
Exactly.
So what's the future of genetic testing look like? What's on the horizon?
Well, the book mentions that SNPs, those kinase variations, they're likely to become even more important in predicting risk for all sorts of conditions like diabetes, mental illness, even addiction.
Really?
Yeah. And scientists are working on developing polygenic risk scores, which take into account the combined effect of multiple SNPs.
That sounds pretty sophisticated.
It is. And as we learn more about how genes are expressed, we might be able to figure out why some people with certain genes get sick while others don't.
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is. And then there's gene therapy, where scientists are trying to actually fix faulty genes. And gene editing tools like CRISPR, that's a whole other exciting area of research.
So lots of promising developments.
Definitely.
It seems like genetics is playing an increasingly important role in medicine.
Absolutely. It's really changing the way we approach healthcare. It's all about personalized, proactive medicine.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into Chapter 8, Decoding Your Cancer Genes. It's a complex topic, but I think we've managed to break it down and make it a little more understandable.
I hope so. It's important information for everyone.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend checking out the book, The 21st Century Man. It's full of valuable information on men's health, presented in a really clear and accessible way.
Couldn't agree more.
And remember, understanding your genes is just the first step. The next step is talking to your doctor about your personal risks and developing a plan to stay healthy.
That's the key. Be proactive, be informed, take control of your health.
Well said. And join us next time on the 21st Century Man podcast, where we'll be tackling Chapter 9, Avoiding Stupid Accidents.
Sounds intriguing.
It is. Until then, take care of yourselves and stay curious.